Hey guys. um, if you can't tell, I'm actually kind of nervous to make this video. I don't know why. I've ranked my most favorite signs, I believe, twice in the past, but it was a while ago. So I thought it might be fun, maybe interesting for you, for me to rank my favorite signs now. Obviously, this is subjective, and I wanted to say a couple things first. So for one, I like all the signs, I really do, and you have to keep in mind, I am doing readings, like that is kind of my business. I make a tiny bit of money from YouTube, but really this is I enjoy doing this kind of work, but it is still kind of work at the end of the day, if that makes sense. So I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable seeking a reading from me, if that makes sense. So I want you to know that even if your sign was ranked less favorite than others, I want you to still feel comfortable getting a reading from me, because I don't judge. Like, I'll be friends with any sign. I don't care, especially sun signs. It's much more complicated than that, as you probably know. And I really, there's something that I like about every sign. So, and really, when it comes to doing a reading, I feel like I could give a very thorough and unbiased reading, regardless of your astrology. I really do. But at the end of the day, though, I have noticed patterns, and there are some signs that I favor more than others. And the last thing I wanted to say before I actually start ranking the signs is, I once heard that, I forget the exact verbiage, but it's like something along the lines of, people like other people that are either similar to them or people that they admire. So people will like you if you either have something in common to them or if they want to be more like you, if that makes sense. So I guess I'm kind of just explaining my own bias. We all have bias. But yeah, of course, the signs that are my most favorite really depend on my own astrology and my experience. My tastes have definitely changed over the years. I've noticed kind of phases. Like back in the day, years ago, when I first got into astrology, I didn't know any Libras, and now I connect with Libras much better. I think it's because I've gotten more confident. So there's many different factors of why you'll connect with certain signs more than others, and I think we connect with different signs at certain times of our lives more than other times, because we're learning. I guess we're always learning from each other. But anyway, so enough of that. I don't know. I want to be brutally honest on this channel, but I don't want to offend anyone. I know everyone says just be yourself, don't be afraid of what anyone else thinks, but that's just not me. I'm a nice guy. What can I say? I don't want to offend anybody. All right, but I'm going to be honest. So we're going to go through alphabetical order through all the signs. Let's start with Aquarius. Aquarius is tricky because I've had some very deep connections with a couple people who had major placements like Sun or Moon in Aquarius. Mostly Sun in Aquarius. I don't know as many Moon and Aquarius people. I have had some really deep connections, but I feel like, and I think I'm not alone, but it's hard to get close to Aquarius. I think that's kind of universal. That's not just me. And even that, there's kind of pros and cons to that. Like, obviously it can feel kind of alienating not feeling close to someone or not being able to know exactly how they feel deep down. I think because air signs are kind of empty in a way. Like, they can be very complex and intelligent, but at the same time, there's this like emptiness there. So that can feel kind of alienating. But part of me, I think, feels insecure, and that actually attracts me to Aquarius. Like, their kind of emotional unavailability attracts me to them, if that makes sense, because it makes me feel insecure. Does that make sense? Like I can't quite read them or tell like if we're cool or not, which I don't know, maybe that's something I need to work out, but I would say that Aquarius would be preferred. I definitely relate to them. I have a lot of air in my chart. I don't have any personal placements in Aquarius necessarily, but I've got a lot of other air placements, and so I definitely relate to, they're very intellectual. I think Aquarius can often feel a little bit awkward as well. That's just my experience, and I also feel that way. So yeah, I definitely relate to them a lot, and I also admire how kind of strong-willed they are. They're a little bit more strong-willed than I am. They, because they're a fixed sign, they can be a little bit stubborn. They can be a little bit hard-headed. So I admire them for that. They stick to what's right for them, or whatever their opinion is, or what have you. Speaking of signs that I admire, Aries, I really do admire Aries. I know not everyone likes Aries. I think Aries is a little bit polarizing because they are so I don't know. Aries is one of the more intense signs. Very fiery, very passionate. They can be too much. I think they can be too energetic for a lot of people. But I really admire that because I think because of our differences, a lot of the traits that I would like to be maybe better at, I think Aries has. Like Aries is so confident, they're so outgoing. They are much more simplistic than I am. Like I'm much more nuanced, as you probably know. um, I'm burdened by like overthinking and like, all these different thoughts and questions and constantly analyzing everything. I like how just simple and straightforward Aries is. I like their energy, their confidence, their enthusiasm. I admire that. And I like being around Aries because they just are who they are, generally speaking. And, even if who they are, even if their energy doesn't match up with me, I at least admire them for putting themselves out there and just being, I don't know if authentic is the word, because I know some Aries can be kind of manipulative, but I think, I don't know, there's something just like transparent or direct about them that I really appreciate. So I think I would also put them in the preferred category. Because I think the only thing keeping them from being in my most favorite would be I do admire them a lot, but I don't relate to them as much. So, while I do admire them and I have had some, intense moments with Aries, that sounds kind of weird. I don't even really mean sexually, well, that too, but that's actually not what I'm talking about. Really, like, multiple people with major Aries placements have like pulled me out of my depression sometimes, or if I'm withdrawn, socially awkward, depressed, like they'll just come right up to me and start talking to me, and they'll pull you out of your head. So I really admire them for that. But I guess what I was saying is, my relationships with Aries have usually been short-lived, which I think that typically is what happens when you don't have a lot in common with each other. The dynamic can be more intense and more meaningful, but it can also be more difficult to maintain, I think. So Aries, I do very much appreciate. I admire them, but we don't have a whole lot in common, though. So I think that's the only thing kind of holding us back from being tighter. Next is Cancer. So I feel like I have to put Cancer in the favorite section. And honestly, like, it took me a long time to know why. Looking at my own chart, I wouldn't think that I would be attracted to Cancers, but time and time again, it seems like it's the easiest for me to become friends with definitely Cancer Sun people. But even I know some Cancer Moon people as well. I've known a lot of Cancer Rising people for sure. I'm not really sure. I heard recently that Cancers are attracted to people that seem a little what's the word, like, I don't want to say weak necessarily, but the Cancer is so nurturing that I think they're more attracted to like maybe personalities that are a little bit more shy, like myself. So maybe that's why. But I feel like Cancers kind of just always like me, Cancer Sun people, that is. And I typically like them as well. They just seem, honestly, like, I think my experience with Cancer is much different than what I hear other people's experience with them are or is. So for example, Cancer to me actually seems very practical. Like, yes, I see that they are very emotional, but I think there is actually kind of a refreshing practicality that comes with that emotion. I feel like they have great, just like, common sense, if that makes sense. And also, I feel like Cancer is very humble, and I think that's something that people can kind of overlook. I really admire their humility, I guess you could say. And yeah, I do have certain issues with Cancer. I'll still put them in my favorite category because they're definitely one of the top two signs that are easiest for me to make friends with. But I would say my only issues with Cancer are I can be very detached. I'm not nearly as emotional as Cancer is. I do have Moon kind of conjunct my rising, so I am like very aware of my feelings in a way that's kind of reminiscent of Cancer. But I have a lot of air in my chart. I'm not nearly as emotional as Cancer is, and so I think that can kind of create some misunderstandings between me and Cancer. I think I can sometimes hurt their feelings without meaning to, because I make stupid jokes sometimes. I joke around. I don't always feel that emotion, so that would be the only kind of issue maybe, but still, that's definitely one of the signs I vibe with the most for sure. Next is Capricorn. I always say Capricorn is kind of like family to me because well, everyone in my immediate family either has a major placement in Capricorn or in the 10th house, which is a little bit similar to Capricorn. It's a little bit of a stretch, but my mom has Capricorn moon. My brother has Capricorn sun and rising. um, and I've gotten to know other people with major placements in Capricorn as well. So to me, it's just very familiar. Like, I don't know. It's hard for me to kind of analyze Capricorn. I know they're very private. We do have some things in common because I do have a lot of Earth in my chart, like mostly Virgo. But yeah, I appreciate, they are. I don't know. They have a great work ethic. I guess that doesn't really have anything to do with my favorite signs. I would say, I guess I'd say preferred as well. Um, hopefully this isn't super boring and I just rank all the signs as I promise you I won't like all the signs this much. But Capricorn, I enjoy, like, just they're very sincere. I feel like they're very straightforward. I also admire how independent they are. Like, they take care of themselves, kind of. So they aren't typically one to, project their kind of emotional baggage onto you, or their insecurities, or they kind of just deal with their own stuff, if that makes sense. So I admire them for that. I'm not really like that. I'm more one that, like, goes out and tells my problems to everybody and over talks, like typical Gemini. But yeah, I admire them for that. And I don't know. I don't really have much to say about Capricorn, but I feel like I just get them. I feel like we're chill. Like, it's not a complicated dynamic between me and Capricorn. Next is Gemini. So I actually don't have as great of chemistry with Gemini, which is interesting because I probably have more placements focused on Gemini than any other sign. I would say less favored, honestly, because I think this is one of those situations where like doesn't always attract like. Is that a saying? Two negative magnets put together, they're going to repel each other. Gemini, me and another Gemini is usually awkward. They don't usually like me. I don't necessarily dislike people with Gemini placements, but I feel like it's difficult for us. Like, I feel like air signs in general, especially Gemini, usually prefer the other person to initiate. Like, air signs, especially Gemini, would usually prefer to kind of observe and, like, adapt to a situation before becoming more outgoing, if that makes sense. So I mean, that's all well and good, but if I'm doing that and another person is also doing that, without other people there, it kind of makes it difficult. There's no one being emotionally vulnerable or kind of, energizing the dynamic, if that makes sense. We're kind of both just overthinking and, like, observing each other. So I think it can become very awkward. I've noticed Gemini suns in particular, I generally don't have great chemistry with. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm trying to think of a Gemini friend I've had. I don't know if I've ever really had a Gemini friend. And again, it's just so interesting because I relate to Gemini more than any other sign, but I don't tend to, well, for whatever reason, it's not that I fight with other Geminis. It's just kind of an awkward connection. I think Gemini is an awkward sign. So putting two awkward people together, I don't think it always really works out super well. Next is Leo. I would say Leo would definitely be neutral. I really like Leo in theory. Like, Leo is so fiery and outgoing. I tend to be more attracted to fire signs. Like, that's definitely a bias that I have. Most of my compatibility placements are focused on fire signs, like my Venus, Descendant, and Lilith. So I do admire fire signs. I admire how direct, confident they are, transparent. They just are what they are, especially Leo. Like, they're fixed fire, so they just are what they are. I think they're the most confident sign. I very much admire that. I love that energy and enthusiasm. I feel like the world needs more of that. But at the same time, I don't know what it is with Leo. Maybe it's my Virgo sun and Mercury, but I just feel like, I don't know. I've had certain Leo friends, but I've never been super close to someone with major Leo placements. I don't know exactly why. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you would know. I don't know. Yeah, honestly, I'm not even sure what to say. I really like them in theory. I just, maybe it's one of those things where we are so different. Like I question everything. I'm constantly analyzing everything. Leo, I think, is definitely one of the less analytical signs, and I appreciate them for that. They're more confident and more warm, and they don't overthink things as much. But I don't know. Maybe we just are too different from each other. I don't know. But I still like them. I just haven't connected with Leo on a super deep level, I don't think. Okay, next is Libra. I would say Libra is one of my most favorite signs for sure. Libra was a mystery to me. When I actually wrote a book, I didn't publish it, but I wrote a book on astrology many years ago. And when I was writing little bits about each sign, and when I got to Libra, I realized I actually didn't know as much about Libra as I thought. And ever since then, I've kind of realized that, at least to me, Libra is kind of a mystery. And since then, I have learned much more about Libra, and I've made many more Libra friends, mostly people with Libra Sun, but also some with Libra Moon as well. And yeah, I think, like I said in the intro, part of why I've become more, I don't know, comfortable or friendly with Libra, and why Libra has been more friendly with me in recent years, really in the last several years, I think it's because I've become more confident and more outgoing, whereas I was actually more shy years ago. I still battle shyness from time to time nowadays, but I used to be much more introverted. And I believe Libras are very much more attracted to outgoing personalities. So yeah, we get along. I think we have a lot in common. Libra also is like the fifth house of Gemini, since I'm a Gemini rising. So Libra's a lot of fun for me. I love how open they are. I kind of admire them for that. They're great at asking questions, which I am not super great at. Um, I usually just talk about myself, which is, I don't know, I feel like that can come across selfish sometimes, and Libra's much better at being truly interested in other people and being very receptive. So yeah, I really admire that, and I enjoy that. I kind of fit with that to a large extent. I think Libra's a fun sign. I think they're versatile. They're complex. I think they're a lot deeper than most people realize. So yeah, it's definitely one of the signs I'm more interested in, and one of the signs that I vibe with the most as well. I've also noticed that Libra, I think, is the kindest sign. Like, if you're just meeting someone up front, and again, maybe there's bias involved in this, but in my experience, though, meeting someone, at least going off sun sign, I would say definitely by far Libra is the kindest sign. They're polite. They're kind of open. They're easygoing. They're the easiest, I think, to get along with on a kind of universal level if you're just meeting a sort of stranger. But yeah, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that. Next is Pisces. So I'm going to be honest, I have trouble with Pisces. And I know there's some of you that comment a lot that are Pisces and like, we're super cool. I don't want to offend anyone. It's not that I don't dislike Pisces. I'll put Pisces in the least less favored. What's funny? I had 2 jobs recently, like 2 day jobs, and both my bosses were Pisces, at the same time, and they're both female Pisces as well, which was kind of funny. But Pisces, I think there is often a disconnect between me and Pisces. I really like Pisces in theory. Like, I really relate to Pisces on paper, if that makes sense. Like, if you read about Pisces, it's all about, oh, they're so dreamy and they're such a mix of different things and they're really spiritual and very intuitive. It's like, I totally relate to all of that. But in the flesh, though, it's totally different if you read about a lion versus if you meet a lion in person. It's a totally different experience, right? So it's the same thing with zodiac signs. Reading about Pisces, I totally relate to. But in person, I think it can be a little bit awkward just because, I'm mostly Virgo and Gemini, and those form oppositions and squares to Pisces. Pisces is the one mutable sign that isn't so analytical, if that makes sense. Like, they can still be very intelligent, but it's a different kind of intelligence. It's a more intuitive, more emotional kind of intelligence. And honestly, I don't want to say I lack that intelligence necessarily, but it's just different for me. You know what I mean? Like, I can be intelligent emotionally and intuitively, but it's different than how they are. They can be intelligent analytically, but it's different than how I am, if that makes sense. Like, neither one is superior or inferior. It's just different. I don't know. I think Pisces and Virgo in particular is an awkward connection, if that makes sense. It's not that I don't like them. Certain Pisces I actually really admire just how comfortable they are being emotionally vulnerable, which is something I definitely lack. Um, so yeah, I can admire that for sure. But again, this is one of those signs though that I haven't been super close to, like in a friendship or family. There's no one super close to me that has had Sun in Pisces. Moon in Pisces I connect with a lot easier for some reason. I really don't know why. Like we vibe much easier. But Sun in Pisces can be a little bit more difficult for me. Definitely not impossible. Like I said, I've had bosses that have Pisces Sun. I currently do actually, and I'll just tell you about my current Pisces Sun boss, and then we'll move on. But yeah, it took months. I mean, I didn't really like her at first. I don't think she liked me at first. I think we're cool now. I think, I definitely like her now. I think she understands me more a little bit now. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I just feel like there's a disconnect. I think it's one of those situations where there's just a lot of differences, if that makes sense, and that doesn't mean one person's right. It's not about right and wrong. It's not about better or worse. It's just, it's just difficult when you are so different, I guess. All right. Next is Sagittarius. Sagittarius, I definitely vibe with more than almost any sign. I would say these three are probably my top three, maybe one other one. But Sagittarius, I have a long history with Sagittarius, particularly romantically. Although, well, I was going to say we could be friends too, but honestly, it's been mostly a romantic thing for me with Sagittarius. I've known a lot of Sagittarius Sun people, but they were either like acquaintances, coworkers, or we were full on in a relationship type of thing. Because Sagittarius kind of completes me. My North Node and my Descendant are in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius has this balance of, they have this fiery passion and charisma. They're very direct and confident. I really admire that because I kind of lack that fire in my chart. But then they are also intellectual, which I really relate to a lot. And I really enjoy how they're simultaneously very intellectual and detached, but also very passionate and very emotional. Like it's very dynamic and very complex, and it's interesting. I think it makes for an interesting and kind of fun person. And yeah, Sagittarius is a very fun sign in my opinion. They can be a little reckless, which I've definitely experienced. Like that can definitely be a drawback in relationships. Since I'm Virgo, I'm very different. But at the same time, I enjoy that kind of spontaneity though. I enjoy just how open they are with like new experiences and adventure and things like that. So definitely, I think it's consistently been one of my favorite signs. Next is Scorpio. So this is another sign I don't relate to as much. But that being said, I probably give more readings to Scorpio Sun people than any other sign. And I don't know why. Honestly, what's interesting? So I've even noticed with my day job, because I work sales right now. I don't want to say too much about that, but even then, I've been prospecting a lot with Scorpio Suns, and I feel like the rapport is actually easy for me to build with Scorpios. I think the reason why is because Scorpios are very perceptive. They're constantly looking for bullshit. Like they're looking for threats, I guess you could say. They're looking for dishonesty, insecurities. They're constantly searching. And with my personality, I think that actually works well because I'm honest. Like, I'm honest to a fault. And I have a history of feeling very misunderstood. And so all I've ever wanted is just to be understood. And then Scorpio comes along being all extremely perceptive. And I love that. Like, I don't really feel exposed when someone is really good at reading, if that makes sense, if they're very perceptive. I actually feel comfortable. I actually enjoy that. I think Scorpio makes other people generally feel uncomfortable because most people are trying to hide something. Most people don't want you to read them. But me, I'm really not trying to hide anything. I want to be understood. So that does work very well with me and Scorpio. But But yeah, so I did just talk positively a lot about Scorpio, but I think the only downside is, like, I think we can, like, on a professional level or a shallow level, we can build rapport great, we can get along great. But when it comes to deeper friendships, I don't think I've made a really close friend who has had a major placement in Scorpio so much. And there's not really anyone in my family that has major Scorpio placements. I'm just a little bit less familiar with that sign. I think Scorpio really clashes with my Gemini side because I like to say I like to stay kind of upbeat. I don't mind delving into heavier topics sometimes, but my only kind of criticism, I guess you could say, would be I think Scorpio can be unnecessarily negative or critical when it's not useful. Like, there's no point to it. Like, obviously, that's my own perspective, that's my own opinion. I do admire how honest Scorpio is. I appreciate that. Like, I like knowing what I'm dealing with in someone else, so I enjoy that. But that doesn't mean you have to necessarily say every negative thought. Like, I've known people, this is just an example, but I've worked with people who have major placements in Scorpio who they'll just go up to someone and say, "Oh, I don't like your outfit today. Like, you look like crap. You look old." And it's like, okay, it's fine to think that. It's fine to have that as your opinion, but like saying that it's just destructive, right? You're just pointlessly criticizing someone else. Like, I think Scorpio can lack that kind of tact, I guess. Every sign lacks this or that thing. But I guess, I don't know, I prefer to stay positive, upbeat. So I think that's my main beef with Scorpio, I guess you could say. But this is another sign I really like on paper. I like theoretically. Like, Mercury in Scorpio, for example, is one of my favorite placements. That's probably my favorite Mercury placement, honestly, because it's so simultaneously intellectual and analytical, but also deeply emotional. Probably slightly more emotional than analytical, but they can do both, though. Like, they're very versatile, extremely intelligent. So, I do admire certain Scorpio placements. I think Scorpio is... I admire a lot of charts that I've read professionally who have major placements in Scorpio because I think there are so many different talents and different kinds of intelligence that are available to you when you have these major placements in Scorpio, because you're on this like hyper alert state of mind. You're hyper emotionally aware, very perceptive, very intuitive. But you also, I would say Scorpio is the most intellectual sign. Out of all the signs that are symbolized by animals, I think Scorpio is the most intellectual, if that makes sense. Like, out of all the non-human signs, Scorpio would be the most analytical. Like, they can keep up with the more, like, human signs, if that makes sense. Because, all the human signs are generally more intellectual, more analytical. All the animal signs are more instinctual. Scorpio can kind of do both. They're so aware. They can be very physically active and like physically aware, but also emotionally, mentally aware as well. So anyway, so I have lots of positive things to say about Scorpio, but then there's also just a couple things that I think keep me from being close to Scorpio, if that makes sense. Okay, next is Taurus. I really admire Taurus, maybe more than any other sign. Other than the fire signs, I'm not sure. Like, okay, let me put it this way. So, on the one hand, obviously every sign, there's no perfect sign. No sign is better than any other sign. There's valuable lessons that can be learned from each sign, right? Each sign has its pros and cons. But on the other hand, if I were to say, like, if there were a perfect sign, I would say it would be Taurus, because Taurus is simultaneously practical, but also fun, generally speaking. Taurus is an earth sign. All the earth signs are generally responsible, practical, down to earth, grounded, etc. But Taurus is unique among the earth signs because it's ruled by Venus. It's ruled by a benefic. Capricorn's ruled by Saturn, which is a malefic, so it's a little bit more negative in general. I could expand on that, but maybe later. And then Virgo's ruled by Mercury, which is just neutral, so it's more neutral. Taurus is the only one that's ruled by Venus, so it's more positive. That's where you get a little bit more charisma and more of a fun-loving attitude. So Taurus is simultaneously, very responsible, very practical. I would say it's the most reliable sign in the entire zodiac. but they also know how to have a good time too. They like to be sensual. They like to, enjoy themselves. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like Taurus is kind of the most well-rounded sign. Really, the only downside is they can be stubborn, but they're also gentle though, so they can kind of get away with that stubbornness because of their gentleness, if that makes sense. Taurus is also, simultaneously strong-willed but also gentle. They're very straightforward. I think they're a more simple sign, which allows them to be understood on a more universal level. So I really think very positively about Taurus. I haven't had a whole lot of friends with major Taurus placements. There is one really good friend I've had for many years who has Sun and Moon in Taurus, who I very much admire him. He's very perfect, not just because of his Taurus placements, but other things as well. But I digress. But yeah, Taurus. Yeah, I admire them. Maybe in a weird way, I actually admire them more than I relate to them. I am earthy like Taurus, but I get bored very easily though. I need variety. I need to be constantly moving and doing different things. So I think that's the main difference that I have with Taurus. Taurus is more complacent, I guess you could say. I'm just not nearly as routine oriented as Taurus. So I don't know. I definitely like them. I feel like they're easy to get along with, easy to understand. Maybe I wish this weren't the case, but I think I need a little bit more complexity to connect on a deeper emotional level, which honestly I wish that weren't the case, because Taurus is just so chill. And don't get me wrong, Taurus can have deep personalities as well, but it's just different. I would say they're more straightforward. It's not as complicated. And unfortunately, I need more like complicated energy, or that's what I am attracted to for some reason. Okay, and then lastly is Virgo. So I used to not like Virgo as much. I do have Virgo Sun and Mercury. I used to not really like Virgo though, but in recent years, I've really increasingly appreciated Virgo. I admire, well, I guess I enjoy how kind of humble they are. They seem very helpful and just very chill and kind of laid back. But what I enjoy is that, they do come across kind of cold or standoffish at first, but at least in my experience, they tend to warm up pretty easily. And then what I find is that Virgos like chatting, myself included, but other Virgos as well. They will seem standoffish at first, but as soon as they warm up to you, they like to talk. They like to analyze things. Like, I can have really deep, really long conversations with Virgo, and maybe this is just the comfort of dealing with someone who has, the same sun sign as me. But yeah, I just feel like it's very easy dynamic. We understand each other. I really admire Moon and Virgo people, and I actually haven't met a whole lot of them. I've looked up certain people, people on YouTube and famous people that have Moon and Virgo that I really admire. And I've known a couple. I've actually been in a relationship with one. But yeah, I would like to know more Moon and Virgo people though. That's a placement I really admire a lot. And yeah, I think Virgo is an underrated sign. Definitely enjoy their company. So thanks for hanging out with me for the whole video. Hopefully that was enjoyable. I like to think that I have kind of a decent mix. I've got a fire, earth, air, and water sign all in my favorite category. I didn't do that intentionally, but I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, again, definitely don't think I hate your sign, because I don't. I like all of them. I want to get to know everyone, and I'm always learning too. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain signs that I'm more or less familiar with. I think at this point I'm familiar with all of them enough to be professional, like enough to do readings and things like that, and to speculate on each placement and each different sign. I do know all the signs very well. But that being said, and this is true for everyone, not just me, but, I am more and less familiar with certain signs. That's just how it is. Any astrologer will be more or less familiar with certain signs. They probably won't necessarily be that honest. So yeah, I would say the signs that are less favored for me are just ones that are not as familiar to me. I think if I got to know them better, maybe I would like them more, and I'm definitely open to that for sure. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you later.